Welcome to In the Cool of the Day and today's segment of Heart to Heart. You are watching part 2 of a 2-part series. I'm your host, Pastor Denise Wilson. My guests today are Ms. Nichelle Terrell, the HIV/AIDS Prevention Coordinator from the Alexandria Health Department, Dr. Nathaniel Brooks, Vice Facilitator of the Northern Virginia Clergy Council for the Prevention of HIV and AIDS, and Pastor Robert Cheeks, Senior Pastor of the Shiloh Baptist Church in McLean, Virginia. Our topic today is HIV in the community and the church. Welcome to Heart to Heart. I want to start off this segment with talking about the difference between HIV and AIDS, because a lot of times we want to clump them together when they are really two separate.
Yes, many people would think that HIV and AIDS are the same, but HIV is the virus that leads to AIDS. Many people ask, well, how do you know if you have AIDS and not HIV, or what point? And I think it's so good for you to stay in contact with your doctor if you are affected by HIV, that you would know when it's going to move over into the actual disease itself. But we do know what's most important is that you get checked, that you find your status, to find out if you have HIV. HIV is the virus that leads to AIDS, and it's not AIDS.
Ms. Terrell, can you tell us, is it possible to get the HIV virus and not have it go to full-blown AIDS?
We do have some clients who have remained HIV positive. They may die of other diseases or cancer or car accident or something like that. But like Reverend Brooks was saying, you do need to know your status. Once you know your status and get into treatment, you can continue treatment. There's some lifestyle changes you'll probably have to make. If all of that goes well, then you could stay, you won't progress. The disease won't progress to AIDS. But it's important, that's why it's so important to get tested and know your status as soon as possible. That's one of the main things that we try to get over to people, and the CDC tries to, recognize it. Testing and knowing your status is what's important.
So who needs to get tested?
Everybody.
Okay. Pastor Brooks, how does the church bridge the gap between the person in the congregation with HIV and still effectively minister to the sheep?
Well, the person in the congregation is the sheep. And I believe that how does a church or the pastor reach his congregation? The pastor must know his congregation. It must know the makeup, it must know the culture, and where and how much the church can take. One effective bridge is creating a ministry with HIV and AIDS within that church. If the church is ready, I believe that every church should have a ministry for HIV and AIDS. Why? Because it's not just with people that come in with HIV/AIDS, but it's to educate, it's to make aware, it's to build relationships, and it's to let the congregation know that we have put something in place for you to become more knowledgeable about this within your church. And I think that's the biggest gap right there, is that the church has to take the steps to develop an effective ministry of HIV and AIDS.
Pastor Cheeks?
As ministers of the gospel of the Lord Jesus Christ, it's important for us to be ambassadors not only of Christ, but of God's love. And by doing so, you'll create an environment and an atmosphere that's conducive for people to feel that they can find a place in the church. And so that's when you find a lot of people turning away from the church because they don't find a place, nor do they find themselves received. For us at Shiloh, what happened, we got heavily involved in the summit, HIV/AIDS summit that took place a few years back, and it continues to go on. Our church participated. When we came back that same Sunday, the next day, I shared the congregation what took place and how proud I was of our participation, and then mentioned to them, listen, we don't have an HIV/AIDS ministry yet. However, I'm the ministry, and so is my wife. If anyone knows of anyone who is infected or affected, let them come see us or come talk to us, and we can do our best to minister until we structure something formally and call it a ministry. Right after that service, we had members coming after and saying that was for me. People were stepping forward saying, I have this family member, I have that family member. quietly and one-on-one, and it just blew my mind. But it was all a movement of God to get us to that place of connecting to the congregation, ministering at the same time to the whole congregation on this whole epidemic that's wiping our community out, while at the same time letting those know who are infected and affected that they can find a place where they will be received and that they'll get necessary help that they need.
Well, it's good that your congregation was receptive. I know this was a question that we all were talking about off camera and nobody really wanted to answer it, but I'm going to ask it anyway. In your opinion, where does the church stand now, and what will the church look like 10 years from now as it pertains to the HIV awareness? And in your opinion, do you think that we have begun to scratch the surface as churches regarding HIV awareness?
Where does the church stand now? It's hard probably to say where they stand, but I think the church is on the fence. I think they don't know which direction to go. I think many churches want to step out and do more, but for the fear of the pastor not being ostracized or the congregation turning against that particular pastor, they're on the fence. And it's safe to say that they're still on the fence. I don't think they're against it or they are for it. I think it's on the fence. I think they're toggling between what shall we do. 10 years from now, the church will change. Youth, the culture, HIV epidemic, if we don't catch hold of it quickly, it's going to rise, and our communities are going to still be majorly affected, which is going to cause the church to have to address it. With the changing trends in culture and the area around many churches, the church is going to have to start addressing issues of the community, which takes me back to the understanding, where will the church be in 10 years? I think many churches will return back to community churches. Churches that will heal within that community. No longer will we have to overlook the dry bones that are around our communities, lock our doors, turn the lights off, and go home. We're going to have to start dealing with it as this epidemic grows. But the church in 10 years will have to be known for what it's doing within the community.
Pastor Cheeks?
Yes, we're doing the civil rights era, the church, and even prior to that, the church was the hallmark of the community. And it was the place where you received everything you needed, education, social, psychological, whatever you needed in the black community. It was everything. Nowadays, it's an option. It's not the first and primary place that we go. But where I see us today, I think that we've done a great job of trying to attack this, not on the larger scale, but there are more churches understanding their role and understanding that. And now we're in this season and time frame where we celebrated, the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington, things like that, where people are realizing that we can make a difference when we come together. So the church today is starting to get back to that place, its grassroots, if you will, even in terms of the civil rights movement, of realizing what kind of difference we can make. If we can make a difference civically, we can do it socially. I think that we're doing a great job. I think more churches need to get involved, or more churches need to have this conversation today. What it'll look like 10 years from now, I pray more churches will be at a point where not only do they have effective and efficient ministries and support groups for this, but we're also crossing over ethnicities and culturally, reaching out to others and seeing what works for you all. May not work for us. So I hope 10 years from now we see that more branching out, working with diversity. And then I just think that I do believe we've scratched the surface. Just as you've mentioned, we've scratched the surface. We've got so much more work to do, so much more marching to do, if you will.
And I think that we scratched the surface, but I think some churches are still itching. They haven't scratched it. I think that they're itching because they don't know where to scratch. And you ever had a scratch somewhere and you're just trying to get around? I think they're scratching around it. And here's something I probably want to touch upon. In order for the church to become healthy, they have to separate the issues at hand. I think a lot of churches don't want to approach the subject because they think they have to buy into same-sex marriage. So if I buy into HIV/AIDS, then I'm going to have to deal with same-sex marriage. That's not true. It has nothing to do with it. Because there are a lot of people that's not married that have HIV/AIDS. And I think that we have to stop putting issues together and deal with the issue at hand. A sickness is a sickness, how a person got it. You know, oftentimes when I got a fever when I was young, nobody asked, how did you get the fever? I just had it, and they treated the fever. You know, if I started coughing, they assumed that I got it from keeping the window up in my bedroom. Now we do a whole lot of assuming. Just don't worry about how a person received it. Help the person. That's what Jesus of Nazareth did.
Right.
He never, in my reading the Bible, and I could be wrong, never asked the person, hey, how did you get this? How did you die, Lazarus? How did you, woman at the well, how did you get to this well? It's the same. He dealt with the issue that was the issue at hand. And I think that in order for church to approach the HIV epidemic, they have to get the theology right on how to approach the community, and not based on something that's not theological based or out of their ego or their emotions.
That's very good. Ms. Terrell, I know you work as a coordinator. Do you all have programs that you all can introduce into churches or into community situations where you go in and you talk to people? Because we look at you as being the people, the knowledgeable people, because this is your area of expertise. So do you have a program that you take into churches and communities?
We do. Anyone who calls and says we want HIV education, we'll go out to within the city of Alexandria or the Northern Virginia Prevention Committee. We'll figure out a way and we'll go out and go into the schools, the churches. We've done testing events at various churches. I also work with the Northern Virginia Clergy Council on HIV and AIDS, and they're currently developing a curriculum for churches who want to start an HIV AIDS ministry. So I have lots of referrals for events. If you're doing a health fair at your church or community, I work with the NAACP Alexandria branch. If they're hosting something really large in the community, we can go out and set up information tables. We'll do testing there. We'll do forums, whatever fits that particular church or community organization. We can, narrow it down to the needs of the church or the needs of the organization. We can tailor it to the needs of that church or organization. If they're just starting out, we might just set up an information table. If they feel that, their congregation is ready for testing, we'll do that as well.
It's good to know about the education. But we're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back within the cool of the day and this section of Heart to Heart. Hello, I am Pastor Denise Wilson. I want to thank you for watching In the Cool of the Day and our upcoming segment on Heart to Heart. On Saturday, October the 19th, 2013, please join us for our 4th annual Women's Prayer Breakfast, a call for the wailing women, sponsored by the Wilson Ministry Foundation. It will be held at 9 o'clock at the Crown Plaza Hotel, 2200 Centerville Road, Herndon, Virginia. Our guest speaker will be Reverend Victoria Venable from the Cathedral of Christ Baptist Church in Capitol Heights, Maryland. For more information, please go to www.denisewilson.org or call us at 571-241-7914. I look forward to seeing you there. Welcome back. You are watching In the Cool of the Day and today's segment of Heart to Heart. I'm your host, Pastor Denise Wilson, and I'm here with my guests, Ms. Nichelle Terrell, Dr. Nathaniel Brooks, and Pastor Robert Cheeks. And our topic today is HIV in the community and the church. Pastor Brooks, how does the church reach the infected, and how can we bring effective HIV awareness when people are still ashamed, uncomfortable, or can't trust the church to share such a private issue?
Well, with anything, in any community, whether you have a disease or you have a personal, you have to be careful what you say and who you say it to. And I want to say that because your business is your business. However, if you are seeking advice, make sure that you go to the senior pastor first. The senior pastor has the job to keep confidentiality. he's mandated to keep confidentiality. He must follow that of what Jesus Christ did. I think that it comes with comfort. I don't believe that a person should share everything on their first go around. I think they should definitely wait. Also know when to speak and what to say and how to say it. I think there's a word that we need to talk about. It's called kuf. It's a way how to say it and when to say it. How does it reach a community that don't feel safe in the church? Well, it's up to that church to make people feel safe. And it goes back to the question of, are HIV-infected people allowed in the church, or are they not just allowed, or are they welcome in the church? And that's two different questions. Yes, they're allowed in the church. Anybody's allowed in the church, because if I don't tell you what I have, you're allowed in there. But where they're welcome, that's two different things. Nobody wants to come into a church being beat up, talked about, slandered, and hurt, and based on a mistake that they made. And basically, it's a mistake. Sometimes we turn the wrong corners in life, and we all have. And I think that the church has an obligation to be compassionate and to love that individual and keep that individual concerns a secret, personal, between them. It should not be spread into the congregation. And I think many churches have done a very unhealthy job of doing that. That a person come and hurt, and their business is all over the church, or their business is spread over everywhere, and people are talked about, and they leave the church more wounded than what they came in. Our job is to bridge the gap between that individual and show that individual the direction of Christ. And as that individual make an informed decision to have Christ walk in their life, then I believe that the Holy Spirit work on that individual to turn their lifestyle around. I think what happens is that we try to affect that individual before we know that individual. And that is disaster waiting to happen.
Pastor Cheeks, you are a senior pastor.
Yes.
How would you address that subject?
How does the church reach the infected? I first start by saying I'm a firm believer that actions speak louder than words. And we're taught that the God that we serve is love. And so understanding that love is not just a noun, love is also a verb that's indicative upon the way that we act. And so when we would see God move, he would just demonstrate his love and demonstrate who he is rather. And so even, I think it's Luke, in the Gospel of Luke chapter 10, where Jesus has a conversation with teachers of law about the word and the law, where he says, what should I do in terms of gaining more life? He says to them, well, just keep the law that God says, love God with your all and love your neighbor as yourself. And he says, okay, I keep the first part, but who's my neighbor? Then he gets into this parable about the Good Samaritan, how an individual was coming down from Jerusalem, heading to Judah, and on his way, robbers jumped him, beat him up, left him for dead. The Pharisees, the priests, and then the Levites both passed him, didn't stop. These are to us, if you bring it 2,000 years forward, it's preachers and church folk walk right by and didn't do anything. Where this Good Samaritan stopped, took care of him, met his needs, put him on his own horse, took him to a place, and made sure he got cared for. Jesus said, that's your neighbor, the Good Samaritan. Now, the Samaritans, if you will, in that particular day were ones who were outcasts. They didn't deal with the Good Samaritans for tension between the ethnicities. But the message to us is to even in the Good Samaritan portion, knowing that he's an outcast doesn't mean that even though I'm out, I'm not down, or I'm not left out where I can't do anything for someone else. And so we also have to be reminded that even though we may have our own issues, doesn't mean we can't help somebody else. And so the way that we can effectively reach the infected is, one, letting them know that they're not by themselves. We may not have the same issue, but we have our own issues, but we're going to help you with yours at this particular time. And I think it's important that people can feel that when they enter a church, they can feel not only that they can find a place, but they can find a place that receives them for who they are. Christ even said, just come unto me, those who are heavy laden, those who are burdened, for I'll give you rest. We have to be able to find that. And when we come and not only find rest, find love, and then find empowerment, enlightenment to go back out and then make a difference. And so I think the first way is that people can realize that we're really who we are to be, the church, allowing our actions to speak louder than our words, Or we don't want to just give lip service, but I want to be able to see, and want to be able to demonstrate and show that we mean what we say. So in essence, practice what we preach. And I think that's helped for us, where people generally say, we felt the love here, we felt the warmth, we felt the sincerity, after hearing what we've said. Now see our actions. And then that's one way that we've effectively reached those who are infected, and then help those who may not understand it so that they don't hurt those, because it is said, is true, that hurt people hurt people. And so we have to help people understand that even though you're hurt, don't take it out on someone else or use it as a lens to cause more pain in somebody else by simply just looking at them, and then you get into this place of stigmatism. And so we tried to help change that kind of dynamic, as I was mentioning on the previous segment, of creating a atmosphere, an environment that one can feel not only the presence of God, but I'm in a place where there are a bunch of other individuals who aren't bound, who aren't caught up on what my issue may be, but they're looking to get help for their own, so when we can help somebody else. And I think that's important. The Good Samaritan, he didn't worry about whatever he was going through. I just need to help somebody else. And not like the priest or the Levite who were trying to get to ministry by passing ministry. Oftentimes we do that, but to find opportunities wherever you are. You could be sitting next to that person come this Sunday on the pew and not necessarily know it, but how can you demonstrate the love of God, the same love that God gave to us, and we ought to do for others. So
That's great. That's great. Mr. Al, Pastor Cheeks just made a very important analogy. If I'm sitting in my church seat and someone comes in that I know is infected with the HIV virus, should I be moving to the next pew?
No, you should not. That is something that we are still seeing, that people are still coming to us saying that's still going on. They're still having relatives at Sunday dinner that insist they use the paper plates or the plastic forks and knives. That's why it's important that people are educated about HIV, the virus, how you can get it, how it's spread, how it is not spread, and how people should be treated. And that's education. HIV 101 is typically the first thing we'll do if we do a forum or discussion, symposium. It may be like a 20-minute discussion or just a brief opening, but we want to make sure people know how it is spread, how it is not spread. You don't need to use separate utensils. You don't need to clean off the toilet every time that person uses the bathroom. It's important to know the basic facts of HIV.
That's a very good point. Where can someone go to get tested for HIV/AIDS in confidence?
Well, they can go to their local health district. There's a website that you can go to that you can put your zip code in, and it'll come up with various places that you can go and get an HIV test. I believe it's hivaids.org or voraonline.org. You can go there and it'll have a place where you put your zip code in, and your health district might come up, or some of the other agencies that focus on HIV and AIDS care and case management and stuff like that. Their names will come up, and testing dates and times.
And you can start with your primary physician, where you go get your physicals and checkup requests to see if that could be a part of your physical and checkup, because your primary physician should know when your status, if they already don't know, and you also should check with them because they have other resources they can point you to.
Great, great. We have just a few more minutes, and what I would like to do is to have each of you give some closing words to tell our audience. Speak from your heart. You know what to do.
I think that the HIV/AIDS epidemic is increasing. It's increasing in our culture mainly because we are in denial and we refuse to look at the elephant in the room. Children are dying, children are being infected, and children are going out re-affecting people. And we must take hold of it, and it starts with the church. It starts with the household, but then it starts also with the church. And I think that in order for us to capture this generation before they push themselves off of a bridge, that we have to educate them, and we have to give them some type of awareness program and ministry. We cannot lose this generation to this virus, but we must gain this generation by making them knowledgeable to this virus. We have to put into our hearts that all people matter, not just the people that we know on a daily basis, but all people.
Great. Mr. L?
My main focus is always on education. It's learning the disease, knowing, like I said before, what causes it, what does not, how to protect yourself, healthy relationships so that you will want to protect yourself. We have an issue also in the community with young black males, young black men who are having sex with men. That's part of the stigma issue that I spoke of earlier. We need to get around certain behaviors so that we can have an honest conversation and open our hearts and minds to deal with these issues with the younger generation. Again, education is key, and knowing your status. I'm always telling people, have you been tested? Do you know your status? If you know your status, if it's positive, you need to go find treatment. We can refer you someplace, like your primary medical doctor if you're insured. There are places you can go. If you're not, you need to do what you need to do to stay negative.
Pastor Cheeks, can
Yes.
you give us just a couple of words?
Sure. I'll just say, as disheartening, discouraging, disappointing by the numbers, by looking at the data, the statistics, how that can discourage you, I would just encourage us to just, if you want to make a difference, start by impacting the world, if you will, one life at a time.
Great.
Start at your life, and then work towards others, and then that way, as others have mentioned, first start with know your status by getting tested, and then in addition to knowing your status, know what to do with your status.
Great. Well, it's been great to have you all with us today, and this has been such a wonderful show, and I pray that our viewers were more enlightened about this subject. We're looking forward to seeing you again real soon. For more information on this segment of Heart to Heart, please go to denisewilson.com, denisewilson.org, and from my heart to yours, God bless you.